Welcome in, Knicks Nation. The streets are buzzing today as we head towards the playoffs this week. We welcome in Coach Nick of BBallbreakdown, friend of the show. Coach, it's always great to see you. I look forward to our conversation.
Hey, thanks for having me. I always love talking Knicks basketball with you and the rest of your audience.
Yeah, no, they love hearing your thoughts as well. And look, fitting time because of what's happening. But the video you just dropped the other day as well is a great video on Jalen Brunson and how he is changing the game. And really good to get your observations on his season. And the highlights as well. But what have you seen from the team first, and then we'll dive more into Brunson as the Knicks get the second seed now and are set to face Miami or Philadelphia.
Well, you see a really like a tough team, right, in that Thibs mold, and it was evidence in the fact that they weren't going to try and lose a game at the end to try and adjust their seating. They were going to go out there and win. It was interesting that the Bulls played as hard as they did. It was a really good game because the Bulls were like locked in and to their seating. It didn't seem like they had any matter. But Billy Donovan is probably in that same mold as well. We're like we're playing here. We're gonna play and try and win this game. So it's really great to see as far as the culture goes when what they're instilling. Right. I mean, they're talking about right now are the Lakers going to throw the first game in the play-in so they don't have to play the Nuggets if they make it all the way. That's playing with a lot of fire, right? But it's also indicative of this sort of the culture of like, you never should do that. It's an affront to the game of basketball itself. So Tibbs will never let that happen. And as a result, you're going to have guys. DiVincenzo played 51 minutes. How many minutes did he play?
52.
52 minutes on the eve of playing as a second seed in the Eastern Conference. Hilarious. The interesting thing about that, we also threw this out there, was the Pelicans win 49 games and are in the play-in. The Knicks win 50 games and are second in the East. So I find that kind of a fascinating dichotomy of the strengths of these two conferences.
Yeah, I think the two of the worst teams in the league are in the East with Wizards and Detroit. You could probably show Charlotte in there as well. But yeah, you hit the nail in terms of the competitiveness. As I went live last night and summed up the thoughts on the day, it was weird because I was expecting the Bulls to have everyone questionable and then sit them, knowing that they're going to have to back up with this do or die elimination play-in. But they went first and went to play their starters, and the Knicks obviously Tom Thibodeau didn't hesitate. Which is the mindset of this team, coach. This season, it's always been backs to the wall, next man up, right? With Julius going down, Mitchell Robinson, and the injuries to OG as well. And I wasn't surprised that the Knicks really fought to extend their winning streak to 5 games now and head into the playoffs with that momentum as well. If you were
Right.
the coach of the Knicks, would you have played everyone, maybe not as many minutes, but would you have done what Tibbs did?
Well, my problem with Tibbs, I think, overall, is that he'll play somebody, 53, 52 minutes in a game when that shouldn't really ever happen. It just shouldn't happen that way. But he knows like the best way for them to win is to really just play, the top 5, 6, 7 guys most of those minutes. And I suppose it was a one game thing because he figures it's not going to be like a thing that happens 5 games in a row. He could get away with that. And DiVincenzo's young, but we've seen in the past how that does have an adverse effect on health for his teams, and that's a real scary thing because the last thing you want, again, like with Randle. Now Randle didn't. It wasn't related to playing time, his injury. But certainly you have to have that on your mind the more minutes you play like that. And you'd like to think that they were good enough to beat a middling Bulls team without having to play DiVincenzo 52 minutes. That's probably the more concerning thing is, in the state of the Knicks right now, or with short of those kind of crazy minutes played, they can't beat the Knicks. Wait, remind me, it was in Madison Square Garden, right? Can't beat the
Yep.
Knicks. They can't beat the Bulls at home. That's a real problem, and that might make me a little bit worried at this point. But the matchup is going to be a really interesting thing as well because it's not a guarantee that the Sixers are going to win that series. We don't know if Embiid is going to be anywhere near healthy. And we had a talk on my show earlier today about whether if the Heat end up playing the Knicks, that might be the matchup they don't want to deal with.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's the thought on Knicks Nation's mind right now. Could the Knicks have, you know, manipulated the result, to favor a better matchup. But at the end of the day, the Knicks have to beat good teams to advance.
Mhm.
They were underdogs against Cleveland in the first round last season, and we showed the world that we beat Cleveland, who was a hot team, coming in as well. But all in all, look, Thibodeau, in terms of the team and the season, right? What have you seen from Thibs, and for him to get the Knicks to where they are, right? What has he done right in your eyes?
Well, it's funny because I was trying to do a video on how to beat the Nuggets because I don't think anyone can. And I've tried to do this video 3 or 4 times this year. And every time I get into it and I watch, hundreds of clips, I'm like, there is no way to beat them, right? But I did go through in the last several months teams that did beat them by any kind of margin, and the Knicks have the biggest margin, I believe, of victory over the Nuggets. And I also looked at it to make sure the Nuggets were playing at full strength because some of their losses were when they didn't have everybody. So that was a game where the Knicks beat them, and they beat them by 15 points, something like that. And I was going through that game for someone else, but it kind of has me thinking about this conversation in terms of what was working really well was even a guy like Jericho Sims just being really aggressive, very physical with Jokic, and he's also quick. He's got a lot of good lateral movement, and then everybody else was being physical, and like every kind of cut had a body on them, and it was just a slog for the Nuggets who thrive on cutting and movement. So when you think about like what that means defensively, at least. That's what it is. Not only can Thibs get him to play that way and be physical, he's lucky because they're entering a phase of the season now where the fouls are not as called as much, and they were kind of already, Brunson realized this firsthand after the All-Star break, but they were able to get away with more physicality, which I think is fine. And then offensively, you get. You get a lot of triangle offense, and I'm a triangle offense coach, and so it's really great to see him continue to keep triangle offense concepts alive. That really are does help the role players generate shots in rhythm that they would need to be able to to hit comfortably. So you kind of mix all those things together, and you have a team that no one else really wants to play. They don't want to deal with physicality like that. They don't want to deal with Brunson, and Thibs is always year in and year out for all his teams has always tended to have that lead guard just excel to the nth degree. And for a while there, it was surprising that these random guards would come out of nowhere and be awesome for his teams. Obviously Brunson is not coming out of nowhere, but when you put him in situations where they're allowing him to spread the floor, and by the way, that's the one downfall I had. I think maybe we talked about this the last time. I can't remember now. Was the lack of spacing that they're putting around Brunson, and yet he's still getting to the basket. Which makes you think that there's arguments for other players in this league that haven't done as well without spacing around them in years past. And you kind of want to shrug and say, hey, it's a really good point. But then you watch Brunson do it, and you're like, well, then all those guys should have still been able to do it if they really were that good.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest factors this season has been the three-point ball, Coach. Brunson's, obviously, his three-point shot has gone to another level, and we've got some questions coming through the chat. We'll get through them on Brunson. And in terms of the shooting, his shot chart last night, Coach, I'll try and bring that up, but all of his shots basically came in the paint last night with Vucevic, not the rim protector. Brunson can do it both ways. He can devastate you from the pull-up three, or he can live in the paint as well. And last night, he just lived in the paint. But that's been one of the biggest factors for me. Thibs has brought the physicality, like we know on this team, the rim protection, but we simply got better shooters, with DiVincenzo, breaking the franchise record this season. I'll get your thoughts on him. Deuce McBride, who's now a real threat that teams, are on the scouting report, closing out hard on him. OG Anunoby acquisition as well. And then we mentioned, you take away Barrett, who was big usage, better getting to the cup, clogging the paint. Randle, bully ball, clogging the paint as well. How do you see all of that coincide with the three-point shooting?
Well, certainly, it's great to see Thibs utilize it more. In my mind's eye, I'm thinking a lot of his teams in the past have not. And obviously, why that's really important. And DiVincenzo, if we want to just talk about him for a second, is a guy from Golden State. And then, wait, did he go somewhere else in between? No.
Sacramento for a cup of coffee.
Okay, and then Sacramento, and then the Knicks. He's just one of those guys who's extremely athletic, has a really great shot. Obviously, coming out of Villanova is really skilled as it is coming already from that background. So he's the kind of guy that he's the guy that you can win a title with, right? And then and as they showed, if he can be your seventh man as on a title winner. Can he be a fifth man or a fourth man? I don't know. We'll find out pretty quick this year. But just a guy that every coach loves to have on your team in a way that and by the way, he plays defense. He plugs into whatever you need him to do, just like a lot of the guys on this team do. It's really, you got to give. This is probably the best run Knicks team from the front office perspective that we've ever seen. I mean, maybe Pat Riley was better, maybe, but at least now it's not like I had to grow up in Chicago, watching those Bulls Knicks games. And it was always, Riley was always trying to sort of overcome a skill deficit, right? Now they're not overcoming a skill, they have all the skill and they have the physicality too. So it's a nice match. And so you have both, Thibodeau being able to thrive, and then Leon Rose is doing his thing as well. It really just been the only team I could think had done a better job to put this team together might be like the Mavericks with their in-season trades. So it really has just been it's been a pleasure. I can't wait to watch them in the playoffs under this kind of scrutiny. Although, as we see Hart there. You got to be careful about him. He can make some confounding decisions sometimes that you have to just scratch your head and go, what are you doing? Amidst all the other great plays that he does make as well.
Yeah, no, you summed it up. You sound like a Knicks fan there too with Hart. He is the lightning rod of this team, but can give the Knicks such an advantage from that position. But yeah, I'm with you on the Leon Rose, and the Thibs in sync. Leon got a lot of Thibs guys, and it's no coincidence that both are looking good. And do you feel like Thibs could be in Coach of the Year consideration? The fact that he got the Knicks second.
Well, we just saw the Coach of the Year get award from, I guess, what the NBA Coaches Award, and it was Daigneault from OKC Thunder. I don't see him. That storyline is too good. Getting them to the first seed in the West of all places with that team. I don't know if anybody can overcome that, but Thibs will be second. You know what I mean? And they'll probably be a little bit close, but I don't know how OKC they lose that award just because of the narrative. And you know what? He deserves it. He did a really great job with them as well. But I would probably be. It would be tough for me to vote against Thibs if I had to choose in that award for sure.
Yeah, no, I like it. And yeah, and Leon Rose, could be in consideration for that executive of the year with all the moves he's made, finding Hartenstein as a backup, although that wasn't this offseason, but, it's paid dividends. The DiVincenzo, one of the best pickups of the offseason now that he's broken the record, and he's hit more games with 5 threes than anyone else except Steph Curry as
Wow.
well, which has been big this season. But right, Jalen Brunson, let's talk about him because you dropped that video. He's broken a lot of records this season with all of his accolades. I'll bring some of them up on the screen. But yeah, in terms of just your thoughts and elaborating on the video you dropped, and it's in the chat now, Knicks fans, if you haven't checked that out yet, you're missing out. So definitely appreciate you, Coach, for bringing more spotlight onto the season that Jalen Brunson's had. It's been remarkable.
Well, it's been my pleasure. Hopefully, some people out there will watch it and share it and get even more views than it already's gotten. That'd be really great. And, it was funny. I was going to do a video on the best post-up players in the NBA and then anoint Brunson as the best post-up player as like the surprise. And then, as I looked through my stuff, I realized that a lot of times when I do videos with multiple players featured, they don't do as well. And maybe that the audience just likes to have their one, their focus. So I decided, let's just do it on Brunson and focus on what he's doing. And by the way, MVP discussion, without question, he needs to be in there. I know he's not going to win, so let's just, take any of we don't want to get anyone's hopes up. But I was early on that saying this guy has to be in the consideration. And I did that video several months ago. But this video I thought was really important because he is revolutionizing the game. Now, we had seen even a former Knick and Mark Jackson, as a point guard post up. But he would dribble into a post up slowly, back him down and do his 10 dribble thing and then, make a move. In fact, I know that, who was the 5-second post up rule instigated for? Was it Mark Jackson or was it Barkley? I can't remember now.
I think it
But
was
yeah,
Chuck.
it was a Barkley. Okay, but trust me, it was also because of how Mark Jackson did it as well. And so, but what Brunson does on a lot of those is he's driving full speed to the basket, gets cut off, and then turns that into a post up because he's got advantageous position somewhere near the basket. Whereas most other guards would kick it out or would dribble it back out, or or just whatever, yeah, just some version of a pass out of that. He is saying, well, you know what? I don't want to give up this position so easily. I'm going to be able to try and find a way to make this work. And by the way, the reason that's probably a big reason why he doesn't average more assists because some of those drives that would be kickouts, maybe the guy would get a shot or a dribble and a shot. By the way, sometimes the guy dribbles 3 times and gets the assist anyway, right? So I believe that I bet you there's at least 1 assist per game that he doesn't get because he's turning it into a high percentage post up. So you don't have to worry about him being a ball hog and like they're getting a great opportunity anyway on that post up because as I show, his footwork is so darn good. But it does. I think that's why his assist numbers are suffering just a little bit in that category.
Yeah, well, as a coach, you would know the sport is about hunting a mismatch, and
Mm-hmm.
whenever it's Jalen Brunson 1v1, it's become a mismatch now because of the work he's put in, the post up moves, and I think you mentioned last time on our show, you were the one that said he might have the best footwork out of any player, and that's
Yeah, well, they talk about playing off of 2 feet, like that's the big thing, and that's true. Although a lot of times when you were talking about that as a coaching perspective, it's about like you're jumping off of 2 feet to finish. But what he does off of two is in the secrets of basketball. When I coach, if you were on the floor and I'm coaching you how to play like I do with all my players now, I ask them if they want to know what the secret to basketball is, and they usually say, "Okay." And I said the secret to basketball is lifting both feet in the air at the same time. Now that encompasses so many different things that it could be dizzying. But Brunson, if you watch him, that's what he does. He lifts both feet into gallops, skips, jump stops, pivots, all those things that then allow you to explode off the floor. So when you think that he's being really explosive or really, he's got a lot of variability where he's stunting and moving, it's because both feet come off the floor for a second, then he splits his feet and then lands, and then those ground reaction forces he's using with his feet are what propel him much quicker than if you just try to push off your 1 foot that's already anchored to the ground. And so that's what I mean. And in fact, if you study Brunson's game, you wouldn't have to study anyone else's game. The way he plays is the way every guard should be playing. They should have all the moves he has. They should finish as well with the drives and the post ups that he does. But it's perfect. Everything he does, especially for most guards you imagine who are going to be undersized, he has unlocked that and solved that in a way that, like, I don't even think he's 6 feet. He might be 6 feet in shoes, and yet he's finishing and he does all he can do in a way that's just really impressive. And I hope that it will inspire and have a blueprint for a lot of younger guards coming up.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love that praise that, and I'll probably quote you on that, if you study Brunson's game, you don't have to study anyone else's game
No,
because he is, the best guard on the Knicks since Clyde Frazier, a Hall of Famer going back, 50 years, right? And we've
yeah.
got a great question coming in just on that with Brunson coming from Buzzer Beater. What does Brunson have to do to get the MVP award? I could see it in his career, but maybe not until maybe another season or two. But what has to change, do you think, for him to get that?
I don't know, man. The problem is he's going up against Luka and Jokic and Giannis. And I got to tell you, if you want to say in a couple of years he might have a shot, no, because Wembanyama will win all of the MVPs in a couple more years. And by the way, the other thing that's scary is that you're not going to have an American win an MVP award ever again. I don't know. It's going to be a long time, I imagine. So he's our hope, right? I mean, either Tatum or him. So what would he have to do? I mean, he'd have to have like the narrative at the shift and be number one in the conference in a dominant way. The problem is if they did that, it was probably because the team got a little bit better on the margins, and so his production would go down because they'd be better. Kind of like what the argument with Tatum is this year, right? Tatum sacrificed some numbers because they're such a good team, and as a result, he's not in the MVP conversation, which I don't know if he should be anyway. But there's not much more that Brunson can do. I got to tell you, he is put this team on his back. He saves them in the clutch time and time again. He also is the what's the call the emotional core of this team, right? I gotta tell you, his podcast with him and Josh Hart is awesome. I don't listen to it enough, right? But I see all the clips, and I gotta tell you, you get insight into how he communicates with his teammates. And that's exactly what you need. A guy who is no nonsense, but he's hilarious, and he can make his point without having to be belabor or anything and get people angry at him. Because there are players that play that position in a similar way that wear out their welcome after a couple of years because of the way that they grind on their teammates. You can tell he's not like that. He's very well loved, and that's really important. And in fact, we'll get to the Randle discussion, but there's no doubt in my mind that Randle this is as well as Randle's going to play and on any team alongside Hart and Brunson, and it has nothing to do with their play on the court. If you can follow that.
Yeah, yeah, I love the podcast too and the chemistry. But Brunson is that leader that you would ideally love for your best player in terms of the mindset. Now, he was the son of a former pro
Mm-hmm.
coach, and I said that I think on the last show on my post game. There hasn't been a lot of successful sons of former pros to that level, right? So, is there a correlation to that? Do you think, like, because there's clips? I think you've seen that viral video of Rick Brunson putting an 8-year-old Jalen Brunson through the ringer.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny because we looked at that and was he 8 years old? Is that or was that clear in that clip?
I think I made that up. Maybe he was 14, but I
Yeah,
think
I mean maybe whatever. He's somewhere in that range. It's funny because the mindset that Brunson, the father, was doing was good. The methods, and by the way, I don't want to criticize the methods because at that era, which was probably what, like 10 years ago or whatever it was, let's see, it had to be, yeah, somewhere like 10, 11 years ago, it hadn't quite gotten out, even though Rick was a pro coach and around. Those methods would not be the optimal way to train what he wanted to train. That said, the communication he was giving his son and the way he was sort of instilling the hard work, and that was every day, I'm sure that way, certainly worked. And you have to imagine that outside of what they were filming, you saw a lot of other just probably amazing interactions between them that deepened their bond. He wasn't just a taskmaster who was going to scream and yell and be negative the whole time, and he wasn't really even negative. The only question I had about that was just like the methods about what they were doing. There was no sense of a defensive thing, just up and down and pulling up mid-range stuff. Even then I would have had him shooting high school threes, whatever. But that said, the mid-range is so important to his game, and we see that now that all of that was beneficial. So. Nothing but praise for Rick and what he did for his son to develop that. And you have to imagine that, yes, it's possible that other NBA stars with their kids were not doing that. And even though the kids should have gotten every version of the best coaching and training you can imagine while they were growing up, it has been startling that a lot of those players don't shoot really well, the kids. Obviously Del Curry's son shoots pretty well. But we've seen a lot of other sons of NBA players who come in, their shots are broken. It's weird. Like, of all the things they're not going to have a skill, that would be the thing, that you would have. Klay Thompson's not the worst example of that either, where his father was not even a shooter, really. Could shoot a little bit, but not from deep. And Klay Thompson comes in and develops the absolute perfect jump shot, because I'm sure that Michael Thompson made sure that he had, really good training. I don't need to go into the list of the kids who don't, but it always sort of made me think twice. And by the way, Brunson was on that same trajectory a little bit, right? From shooting for Pro 3. He was not very good at that. But really kudos to him to working on it. And in fact, if he doesn't get to 9 or 10 a game attempts, in a year or two, then I'm going to be disappointed. He should be adding, some more of those shots to his game.
Yeah, there's so much he can add, and I'll ask you that question in a minute. It's come from the chat in terms of can Brunson go to another gear? But just quickly on that video, what I took from it, Coach, was that he there was a couple things. I think the father Rick was taking him through endurance and and mindset,
Mm-hmm.
and also there's no doubt they were working on the repetitions, the footwork. I think that's clearly where Jalen Brunson was developing, because it's all muscle memory, all of that. If you practice that from an early age, but also want to add that and ask you, the fact that he stayed in college a little bit longer, do you think that's ideal for a player to come in and maybe maybe they come into the league and people think there's a lower ceiling, but then because they've worked on their craft so much, you see a one giant leap in 1 year or 2 years, like you do with Jalen.
Well, it's funny because a lot of these players, or all these players, work their butts off for their entire youth to get that offer from a Division One team to come play for them. And you would imagine that they would expect when they get there to get the absolute cutting edge training and the best methods and all those things. And guess what? This is not the case. And a lot of these coaches don't know anything more than what they learned from like their coach that from the 70s and now in the 80s, whatever. It's all archaic stuff. It's completely suboptimal. But they win some games. They'll say, well, it's not my job to develop these players. It's my job to win games. And those two things should definitely be the same kind of goal. And so, I've heard plenty of horror stories of players getting there and realizing this is definitely not, or maybe not even realizing at the time. But when you get back and you look at it, like, what were they having us do? It's just not even anything I was going to get better with. If you go to Villanova and you play for Jay Wright, that's a whole other story. This guy had cutting edge training from 10, 15 years ago, had sort of developed a 5-out system that people will imitate now. And so I don't know if Brunson was lucky necessarily because he made he knows how to make a good decision. But going to a program like that, now that's going to be the kind of thing where hopefully NBA GMs are focusing on. They got to find the next Jay Wright. Because is Danny Hurley? I mean, that guy I don't know, but certainly you're going to have to find guys who can develop like that and who treat the individual player development as importantly as they do winning, because those two things should go hand in hand. The better I make my players, the better they're going to play, and so and you'll win. So that's really important where you go. But certainly, yes, there are certain programs that do it that the NBA teams would value a junior or senior coming out for.
Yeah, it's just such a remarkable underdog story, and a showcase example of investing in player development. When Steph Curry came out, yes, people saw the vision, but remember there was that choice between Monte Ellis and Steph, and it's like, and then Bob Myers and the organization invested in Steph, and they saw the fruits of that. Now the Knicks have seen some fruits from DiVincenzo as well, another guy who from the Villanova gang, and Josh Hart, yeah, as well. But with Brunson, do you feel like he has more he can go to? You've broken down hours of film, no doubt, and put together that great video. What do you feel like the ceiling for Jalen Brunson could be?
That's a great question, and I feel like he's pretty darn close to it. The only thing I mentioned earlier would have been like, can he open up a few more 3-point shots that will make it a little bit more efficient for him, and easier, right? He has to work so hard to do all these things that I worry that he's going to be left to like a puddle of sweat on the floor, nothing left of him. Yeah, it hasn't happened. He keeps going. Guys like Jokic too. It's like, how do they play all these heavy minutes, and you have to imagine they're going to get tired, and they don't. So he's unlocked that and figured that out. But I would love to see him just make it a little bit easier, so he doesn't have to score so darn hard with all those really tough shots. And the only way you do that is probably just finding a few more open threes to generate off the dribble, or maybe exist outside in the framework of the offense where they can kick it to him. So that's the only other I think he can unlock. But I mean, he's done things that we haven't seen anybody do, right? His numbers across the board. I keep seeing Tommy Beer tweeting stuff out about it. That one of only 3 players ever to average 30 and this and that, whatever. So I'm not so sure there's that much more above the ceiling that he's got, short of finding a few more threes.
Yeah, well, for me, and here's my take as a Knicks fan, for the Knicks to win a championship, there's no doubt Jalen Brunson needs good help, right? And that's, additions to his game as well as additions to the team, the coaching, and all of that. I wouldn't want to center everything around just Brunson improving. I want to lighten the load for Jalen Brunson, because the fact that he's carrying the team so much isn't necessarily a good thing for your chances to win a championship. It's great that he's improving as a player, but yeah.
And the answer I would say is not Randle coming back, right? We've gone through this. I'm sure everyone who's watched this me before on your show has heard me talk about Randle and be really concerned about him. And so maybe this is the time to talk a little bit about that in terms of. And there was a really great thread that if you go to BBallbreakdown on Twitter, I shared it earlier today from a guy, forgetting who it was, who was kind of showing that the numbers indicate that despite Randle being, having terrific numbers and being a real threat on offense and stuff, the advanced analytics show that there isn't much of a difference when he is off, and they replace him with OG. And so I would whisper, or I would say loudly, that maybe that he's not the answer anyway, and that OG in that position, rather than have them play OG, Randle and Brunson together in that starting lineup, Randle goes away and OG plays that position. I think that might end up being better for them. You get a lot better defense by orders of magnitude, and then you probably get a little better shooting from the 3-point line on catch and shoots. So and you eliminate some of the shots that we don't like, right? Those ISO long, contested middies, which he does. Randle can hit, not in the playoffs so much. And so suddenly now you're maybe a bit more better balanced team. So it sounds like you're on board with this notion as well.
Yeah, well, just on that note, I brought up Brunson's chart from last night. If
Yeah.
RJ or Randle are on this team, do you think we could see a chart like that with all of Brunson's makes in the paint?
No, right, because
The
Randle in his way.
spacing.
Yeah. Randle would definitely be in his way. It's not open enough. And by the way, it wasn't even like he was getting spacing earlier in the year. Like that in the video I did, it was like he'd have at least 2 or 3 non-shooters, and their men would be off of them. And he was getting in the paint anyway. But Randle definitely limits A, the field goal attempts, and then B, there is a spacing thing too on that. So listen, there is a version of the Matrix where they do make it work because he is an elite shot maker and an all-star and all those things, and you usually want to have at least 2 of those. But I think from a fundamental team standpoint, chemistry, I think there's an issue there that would probably be solved by, I would trade Randle and get like maybe a couple players that fill in some other holes for you, like a really good another good 3-and-D guy, and maybe a backup point guard. Wait, like is Deuce the backup point guard at this point, I guess?
Yeah. Let's say like a prototype, like a Paul George. Do you think he could complement the team a bit better?
I mean, listen, Paul George makes any team you have much better. So you're trying to think that you want to have OG, Paul George, and Hartenstein in the front court? Is that what you're thinking?
Look, it'll probably be OG and Paul George.
Right,
And then
OG, Paul George,
Hart goes, yeah.
and then Hartenstein playing center, right?
Yeah.
I mean, damn. And then you have Brunson in the backcourt with
DiVincenzo.
Vincenzo. Yeah, I mean that's a really good. Now that team could win a title. I missed
Yeah.
that. Were they talking about Paul George getting traded to the Knicks?
Well, the rumor is the Sixers because they have cap space, but the Knicks connection is there earlier from conversations the front office has had before the OG deal, and then Paul George's CAA, and he's also good friends with Julius Randle, but Randle would have to probably, be in that deal. But look, yeah, like you said, I still want to see what this team looks like with Randle next season because there's a world where it's effective, but I would love to see Randle at the 5. I don't think we see Randle enough at the 5 spot, but Thibs just loves that rim protection.
Yeah, I don't think that would work that well, honestly. I mean, in my mind's eye, thinking about it, I think it's time. I mean, listen, I have been saying it's time for 3 years now, at least, where they should just pull the trigger and get the most they can out of the value they have with him now. And I think that, I mean, here's the key: if they get to the conference finals without Randle, isn't that enough of a proof of concept that they don't need him?
That would be.
I would
But
think so.
what do you
Now,
need to then overcome the Celtics? Wouldn't then the argument be, oh, if we had Randle, we could get over the hump?
yeah, I mean that's true. I mean, listen, they got to be worried about getting past the Heat first. So okay, the question would be, in my mind, if they got to the conference finals, that would be enough to say, okay, we can trade Randle and shore that a couple things up. But I suppose if they lost in the second round, then we wouldn't say that. Then Randle would come back, right? That's the break point there. Although you're also saying that if they lose to the Celtics in the conference finals, then they shouldn't. It's an interesting take. Again, I'm well on the record. And the other thing about Randle is that there is the chemistry thing. And I think we talked about this before in the last time. And I just got the sense that to show you how good and how attuned Brunson and Hart and DiVincenzo are, is that it seemed to me they were going way above and beyond to try and keep Randall happy. They're screwing around with him and joking with him, and pouring water on his head when he was doing the post game interview, like stuff like that. And I think that because they recognize that when Randall is in one of those funks and he gets into them where he's just kind of angry and he's rocking around and he doesn't play well and it kind of brings everybody down. So I really think that they decided to take it upon themselves. We're going to try and just fake it till we make it with him and really just try and keep him in that mood. But that could also be exhausting, mentally. And so in my mind, it's like, well, okay, if you can replace that with somebody who doesn't have the same kind of issues there, then it might make everything easier and like unlock even more. So, again, Randall's an all-star. He's a terrific player. But I would also just be a little bit wary of the other things that come along with that. And that's the other problem as far as, what his trade value really is and what the Knicks think it is. But again, if they can get to the conference finals and without him, then perhaps they don't need to squeeze every little bit of value out of that trade. They just need to get like the one or two guys that they feel can kind of get them over the hump. But by the way, if they can, listen, if it's Paul George, then they got to do whatever they can do. If they had to trade DiVincenzo to get Paul George, I wonder if they should do that. They might have to do that.
I think it's worth considering, but I think it's still a premature, situation because we've got to see how
Right.
the thing plays out. DiVincenzo's on an amazing contract, but I still feel like Randall raises the floor of the team. You just need to see what else you need to clear. Because I think head to head, the Knicks can beat Boston, right? I mean, I know the other night was, it was a big win, but it was different circumstances. The Knicks were playing harder and played for more, but in a 7-game series, it's going to be different. But I think with Brunson, the world of possibilities have opened up in terms of players to put around and complement the team. And I'm not saying the Knicks need to get Paul George. I was saying that type of player. I
Okay.
know he is 34 years of age and looking for 40 to $50 million as well. So that has to be considered. But one real pro for Randall is that OG Anunoby is not nowhere near as durable. So if you're looking from a coaching standpoint from Thibodeau and you just want to ensure that you can win 50 games consistently, Julius Randle's that guy to help you to do that. Now, the postseason, there was going to be that big waiting, the question mark. What could Randle do this postseason? And we won't get that answer, unfortunately.
Right, right. It really is too bad. And you're right about OG. It's a really good point, and it won't get any better playing for Thibs, who's going to overplay him anyway with that elbow. Is the elbow fine? Did ever that get resolved?
Yeah, it's looking good. Touch wood. It's looking good.
Okay.
Um, But yeah, we do have a super chat based on Caitlin Clark, which we'll hit on shortly. Appreciate you in the chat, rocking out with Coach Nick, B-Ball Breakdown, Knicks Nation. We're here, and the playoffs are here, Coach. So, what are your thoughts on the potential matchups with Coach Spoelstra and Nick Nurse, and how these teams can match up?
Well, it sucks for the Sixers that I don't think Embiid's going to be anywhere near 100% if he's at all out there. So that's really too bad for them. And the Heat. If that's the case, if Embiid is not 90%, if he's any lower than that, then I think the Heat win. And so that's going to be an interesting, turn of events for the Knicks. But yeah, I'd have to say that. And again, I don't know. The Sixers' vibes aren't great either. And so, and it's been a rough year. The Embiid was gone for so long, so any chemistry that could have been built is gone. So I would imagine you have to give the Heat the edge. Tyler Hero is coming back, so I would have to pick the Heat.
Yeah, I would completely agree. I think the physicality, the toughness, and the history that shows that the Heat will start to play higher levels in the playoffs, and so
Mhm.
that sets up potential second round matchup from last season to this season, right? The Knicks pushed it late in Game 6 to a potential Game 7. Randall had the ankle concern. The Knicks did not have quickly in Games 4, 5, and 6.
Mhm.
Brunson is playing at a higher level with the new shooting of the New York Knicks. How would you see a potential series play out with the
Yeah.
Heat and the Knicks?
That's a tough one as well because then you have Spoelstra against Thibs, which is a really good matchup. Um, Man, I mean, I suppose I would have to say that like because the Knicks will have home court advantage, that might just be enough. But I would it probably goes to 7. You know what I mean? Bam I mean, they're really great in the way they can play defense when they really turn it up. The Heat are one of those teams, but again, they continually underachieve in the regular season to the point where you want to underestimate them. And I'm willing to probably still underestimate them enough to say that the Knicks could beat them with the home court advantage.
Yeah, we like that. We like that. I think, yeah, the experience. I think, ironically, and I'll get your thoughts on this, Coach. The Knicks should have the best player on the court, right? Or on any night can have the best player on the court in that series, right? Which is
Absolutely.
what some people don't think is ever possible.
Well, the problem is when you got playoff Jimmy. Playoff Jimmy plays as well as anybody in the league, right? But it's not every game. To the point where he must have been hurt last year because when you look at the early playoff rounds and you see how he's playing the later, it was night and day. So if he's healthy and he's doing what he's doing, he could be as he'll be as impactful as any player in the league, Jokic on down. So it'll be a good test to see how that works. Now the Knicks have defenders for him, right? I'm trying to picture in this year how that worked, but again, we don't know because Jimmy doesn't do what Jimmy wants to do in the playoffs. So it'll be a real interesting matchup and how they can handle that because you can't let him go off. You let him go off, they're going to win. The Heat are going to win that game.
But
So but
yeah,
at least they have the benefit of a Tibbs being a defensive coach that knows how to adjust and has you can put like OG on him, right? And I'd feel good about that.
yeah, no doubt. 20-3. The Knicks record is with OG and Anobi in the squad. But
Wow,
we'll just get through a few super chats, Coach. I know
great.
you've got some time with us, but it is limited. But Buzzer Beater's asking, have you taught your new defense to NBA teams?
I've showed it to a few, and I remember at some point earlier this year, someone was sending me some clips saying, "Are they running this? Because look what they're doing." And you know what? I kind of forgot to go to a deeper dive, but what I did see on my phone when they sent it over looked very similar to what I taught, which is playing behind the ball in a zone. I did do like 60 or 70 Zooms with high school coaches and coaches from all around the world and out some college as well to help them install it for this year. So I'm in the process now of reaching back out to everybody, trying to get as much footage as I can and keep the conversation going so that we can build toward next year. My plan right now would be like next year, let me see if I can find a Division I team that wants to run it. And then the year after that, we can get an NBA team to do it. The NBA would never do it unless they saw like a Division I team run it, or maybe like a European team. So my focus right now is this next season. I want to take the next jump and have a more compelling argument for them for the next year after that. But thanks, the great
Yeah.
question. Thank you for asking.
No, no, appreciate it. Buzzer Beater as well for the generosity. And he's a huge fan of your work as well, and as we all are. But I know in terms of this playoff matchup, right? It's going to be defense first. I think Heat Knicks. Um, in terms of another super chat just come through as well with Caitlin Clark. Buzzer says boldest take ever. Will Caitlin Clark get drafted by an NBA team, a la Louisa Harris, or be considered a free agent, especially with this weak draft?
I mean, it's a nice thought, but no, she will not. She's pretty busy right now, being on Saturday Night Live, and then getting into the draft. But it's funny because we had what's her face said, she's going to be a rude awakening when she gets to the W. She's not be playing against 18-year-olds anymore. Diana Taurasi said that. And I don't know, man. I'm telling you, I think that she'll have an awesome rookie year. I think she'll come in and continue to do what she does. So I would anticipate her, not having to be woken up by any veterans playing a different game of basketball. And
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
she can never
very
guard on an NBA level. That is certainly true. I mean, nobody on the NBA level can guard on the NBA level. So, yeah, it's just it's silly. It's not even really worth entertaining. If you want to have her get into a pickup game, in the summers with some of those guys, all right, that might be interesting. But that's probably about it.
Yeah, I mean, big three is the conversation where she could mix it up and shoot some threes. But in the big three league, we'll see what happens with
Yeah.
that. Um, but yeah, just before we conclude, Coach, in terms of the NBA playoffs remaining, right? Who are your keys to get out of the East and West, and in terms of the MVP?
Well, I've been having the Nuggets winning it all anyway. I don't see anybody beating them. So I think that's who comes out of the West. But we have some really great matchups though, right? You're going to have some really high star power in the play-in games. And then in the regular first round, you have a lot of star power as well with the Suns and the Wolves, Mavericks, Clippers. So we should have some really epic performances in the playoffs. But I don't see anybody beating the Nuggets. It just seems like even with that 2 seed, I don't see the Thunder. The Thunder aren't quite ready for that, and I don't think anyone else is either. So that's who I have coming out of the West. And then on the East side, it's another really big conundrum, but the Celtics they're just overwhelming to anybody in the East. So I don't think it's hard with any credibility to pick against them based on the regular season. But if there was going to be a team, yeah, it would have to be a team that's like got veterans, that they're tough as nails and physical, and will kind of be able to put enough pressure on the two Jays that will start losing the ball like they did last year, and maybe crumble under that kind of pressure. And I suppose if that's the formula, then the one team that probably knows how to do that formula the best would be the Knicks. So I suppose I would have to pick them right behind the Celtics, but that's a tough one. So the Eastern Conference is kind of a strange group of people at this point.
Yeah, no doubt. But yeah, look, as a Knicks fan, it's hard to pick against the Celtics. But if the Knicks can get to that third round, I think it's going to be a hell of a series. But Coach, really appreciate your time. I know you're busy this time of year, and everyone can check Coach out. And some of the questions we may not have got to, please direct them to at BBallbreakdown. Obviously, the most buzzing BBall Breakdown channel on the web, and of course at X, Twitter as well. You're so interactive with people, and really appreciate your time and talking to us about the Knicks and Jalen Brunson.
You got it. As always, it's a great conversation, and I think we solve some problems when we talk to each other about what's going on in the state of the NBA. So it's always a great combo for me. Anytime you want, I'll be here.
Yeah, no, appreciate it. And the chat as well. Appreciate all your buzz and questions. And we'll be talking to more guests, and hopefully we'll have Coach on as the playoffs go through. And once again, yeah, check out B-Ball Breakdown on his YouTube channel. He goes live, Coach, and what have you got coming up?
Oh yeah, well we do live on Monday mornings Pacific time generally, and then during the playoffs I usually do like maybe one video a day at least of game breakdowns of what's going on from the night before. So stay tuned for that. It's always my busiest time of the year, and it's always the most concentrated interest on things. So I'll just whatever the most epic game was that night, I'll go down and I'll break it down with X's and O's and explain what's going on. And then as the series progresses, we start to develop a little bit of a patterns in what they're trying to do. So it's fascinating the chess moves that these coaches are making when they have a day in between and they have the same opponent over and over again. So please come on over to the YouTube channel. You can, Twitter is interesting as well, but YouTube is where it's at.
Yeah, no doubt. And your eyes and ears perk up when you see game changers like Brunson and techniques and trends develop throughout this postseason. Can Denver do it once again, go back to back? Will it be someone else? It's going to be a fascinating playoff. So I'm so glad that the Knicks are in the thick of it as we are, and we're buzzing. And I will talk to everyone soon. Peace.